Uh, before we discuss our topic of the day, let me briefly mention about what happened yesterday. It was the 125th birthday of India's greatest leader and the real first Prime Minister of India, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. I remember as a child, along with other kids, we used to shout Jai Hind in the pub, in the streets, and used to sing Lal Kile se aayi awaaz, Saigal Dhillan Shah Nawaz. And going in more details would take a lot of time. And I think we may have to have a separate session for that. We now have Netaji's digital statue leading to the real statute very soon. The statute is replacing the site of King George V space at the India Gate. The India Gate will be free at last of the visibility of the kind of George V sort of presence, directly or indirectly. The question is, how did this happen? It has happened. We are talking about how it happened that we have this celebration. It happened because of the vision of the great Prime Minister of India, the most acknowledged popular leader of all over the world. So today we are going to discuss what happened earlier this month on January 5th on the Firozpur Highway. Now I request our distinguished colleague, Adityanji, to lead the discussion. Adityanji, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Agnihotri ji, for requesting me to lead this discussion. Before I start the discussion, I would very humbly request all our audience to observe 30 seconds of silent prayers in the memory of Dr. Homi Jahangir Bhabha, the father of India's nuclear program, who was killed in an Air India flight crash into Mont Blanc, France on January 24, 1966 in French Alps. So let's make 30 seconds of silence in memory of Dr. Bhabha. Thank you very much. I will start this discussion by saying the Prime Minister of India is not a person. Prime Minister of India is a national institution. And anything to do with security of the Prime Minister of India is of utmost national concern. Whoever is the occupant of the chair is not the person. It is a national institution, and everyone who is Indian citizen or is of Indian origin must be concerned about the safety of the Prime Minister if there are grave lacunae or lapses. This discussion becomes very important, keeping in view that two sitting prime ministers of post-1947 transfer of power were assassinated. I think the misconception is that those were Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. No, not really. The first sitting Prime Minister of India who was assassinated was Lal Bahadur Shastri, who died on 11th January 1906 in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, under very mysterious circumstances after signing a peace treaty called Tashkent Accord. There was no Indian security guarding the Prime Minister. There was nobody around the Prime Minister when he purportedly died. And that question still has not been answered. Who was responsible for assassinating Lal Bahadur Shastri? Since it happened on foreign soil, it is suspected that there was international dimension to his death or assassination, however one may choose to characterize it. Second sitting Prime Minister to be assassinated was Indira Gandhi at her residence on October 31st, 1984. Both these Prime Ministers belong to Congress Party, but it's not the party that is important. What is important that these were sitting Prime Ministers of India. The third person that who died or was assassinated was a former Prime Minister, was not a sitting Prime Minister, but a former Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi, who was assassinated in Siriperumbadur in Tamil Nadu on May 21st, 1991. And actually, he should have been given adequate security due to a former Prime Minister, but he was again assassinated. And everyone knows that there was a foreign terrorist organization involved in his assassination. So we have two sitting Prime Ministers, one former Prime Minister assassinated, and definitely in two of them, there was a foreign angle. And in two of the deaths, there was a terrorist angle. Following the assassination of Prime Minister Gandhi, a special protection group was created in 1988 by an act of Indian Parliament to protect the Prime Minister and Prime Minister's immediate family members. This Special Protection Group Act was amended further in 2019. So the Special Protection Group protects the Prime Minister at all times, both in India as well as abroad. It also protects Prime Minister's immediate family members who are residing with the Prime Minister at the official residence. And Prime Minister's security is governed by Blue Book rules that are codified. So there is no question of if and buts. There's a very, very strict procedure that is governed by the law. And there are always some, standard of operational procedures. The people who are part of the SPG are volunteers from Central Forces and Railway Force, etc. And they undergo a very rigorous training. They are not allowed to talk to media. They are allowed to volunteer only for a period of 5 years. It's a very competitive job, and they have to be very fit. So that is a little bit about special protection security details. There was a time that SPG continued to provide security to the family of the former Prime Minister and extended family for a period of 28 years. But subsequent to 2019, that has been changed. So a former Prime Minister can get security only up to 5 years if the Intelligence Bureau and NIA and other security agencies decide that it is required. But there has been sort of restriction. And at this point in time, the only protectee of the SPG is the Prime Minister himself. His family members, his mother and his estranged wife are not protectees at this point in time. I may also add that former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is no longer an SPG protectee. He has apparently Z plus security or Y grade security that is provided differently. So let's talk about the incident that happened. The incident happened on January 5th, 2022. Prime Minister was on a visit to Punjab. His cavalcade was stuck, obstructing on a flyover for a period of 20 minutes. And the place this flyover is there, that is 10 kilometers from international border with Pakistan. The original plan was for Prime Minister to travel by helicopter, but because of bad weather, it was decided by the SPG that travel by helicopter is not safe. There are always, by standard operational procedure, contingency plans. And the contingency plan was to travel by road, which required 2 hours of road travel. Alternate routes are always pre-planned and sanitized by the state police in consultation with SPG and NIA and IB. There is no question that, things were not anticipated. These are advanced, actually 72 hours prior to the visit. What are the alternative routes? Where are the safe houses? How the sanitization is done? Whose responsibility is? Although the proximate security of Prime Minister is handled by SPG, but the outer parameter and rest of the sanitization and security, outer cordon is done by the state police. And by rules, it is the responsibility of the Director General of the State Police who is responsible for this. There was a serious security risk to the Prime Minister. There was a breach, and Prime Minister was a sitting duck on a flyway where he could not even do a U-turn. The cavalcade could not do a U-turn because the way the traffic was allowed, on one side, the so-called protesters were blocking the way. Other side, the traffic was going on, so there could not be a U-turn done. I think it's important to know that from the international border across from Pakistan, we are being subjected to drone attacks that are dropping weapons, that are dropping drugs, that are dropping other contraband in Punjab. So it could have been very easy for one of the drone attacks to target Prime Minister's car. Protesters were very much near the Prime Minister's car, 5-6 feet away from the car. It is stated that after turning back and reaching the airport, Prime Minister himself reported some Punjab officials in the airport. Thank your Chief Minister that I was able to return, but alive. That tells you the gravity of the situation. And all of us have seen videos. It's not that, in today's world, there's no, opacity. Everything is on the internet. Everyone has a, video camera, smartphone. So there are videos, what was happened. All of you have seen those videos, and I have seen those videos. So this raises certain questions, and I'm going to be very analytic. I'm not going to be partisan or taking, role of a party, hawk or whatever. I'm going to be very analytic because it concerns national security. Question number one, Punjab Chief Minister, Chief Secretary of Punjab, and Director General of Police of Punjab were not present in the Prime Minister cavalcade, although the protocol dictates that yes, they receive the Prime Minister and they join his cavalcade. Apparently their cars were there, but they were missing. What does it tell you? That's not a normal procedure. During those 20 minutes, the Chief Minister of Punjab, the Chief Secretary of Punjab, and DGP were not answering the telephone calls by the SPG personnel or by NIA. Generally, the alternative route for contingency plans is kept a secret. It's a top secret. How did the protesters come to know that a Prime Minister is going to be traveling by that route and would be on that flyover? So that's a serious question. How did the protesters come to block the flyover if police had sanitized the route by a standard operational procedure? Who allowed? DGP is supposed to give a commitment that yes, this route would be sanitized. There would not be any, blockage. But this was not done. It is stated that the police personnel wanted permission to use force to disperse the protesters, but Punjab Chief Minister refused to give that permission. Let's focus at the Punjab police behavior. As I stated, Director General of Police was not present in the cavalcade. The DIG of Firozpur range reached the scene barely 15 minutes before the Prime Minister cavalcade arrived. Again, that shows lackadaisical attitude towards PM's security. If you see those videos, the police presence on the route is minimal. The claim is made by Punjab police that 10,000 police personnel were on duty. That seems very unconvincing. If there were 10,000 police personnel, they could have easily dispersed the protesters. And it's sad to say, when you see those videos, the police personnel you can identify were drinking tea and chatting with the protesters as if they are their friends, and not showing the seriousness of intent about Prime Minister's security. Let's look at the behavior of the politicians. Immediately after this happened, on Twitter, the Youth Congress leader, Chief, tweeted, "How is the Josh?" In a very mocking tone. Punjab Chief Minister made several indiscreet observations trying to mock the Prime Minister, trying to trivialize the issue, and stating that there was no security lapse to for Prime Minister because Prime Minister was not harmed. Trying to minimize the incident. And in next 2-3 days, he managed some stage-managed contrived shows, which show that Chief Minister's way was blocked by some other protesters. And he gets out of his car and walks to them and shakes hands with them and asks them to leave, saying that if I can do this, Prime Minister can also do this. Then they show, Chief Minister of Punjab trying to help an accident victim on the road by walking out of his car. So those things actually sort of mock the Prime Minister, and the person who is doing this is Chief Minister of Punjab. All the opposition politicians, barring a few, criticize PM's statement on social media rather than understanding the gravity of the situation. And it's unfortunate that the so-called farmers' leaders admitted that information of Prime Minister's route was given to them by Punjab police, but they also claimed that they did not believe it because they thought that they were being, fooled into, taking away their blockade. They didn't believe that Prime Minister was there. Again, all these stories do not make much sense. Furthermore, the insensitive manner in which these lapses have been defended is equally unacceptable. It is alleged that Prime Minister cavalcade was blocked in Meerut also some time ago. Well, that was only for a period of 2 minutes. Traffic was cleared. And Meerut is not 20 kilometers away from Pakistan border. So you have to understand what situation you are talking about. Furthermore, Punjab government questioned the central government inquiry and did not cooperate with the central government in the inquiry. Let's look at our worthy judiciary's response. And I may be a little bit too harsh. I know Ambassador Agnihotri ji was a judge in Delhi. But I find that, I may be hauled for contempt of court or Supreme Court, but I find the attitude and the response of the Supreme Court especially shameful. There's a serious lapse to the security of the Prime Minister. You have the background information that 2 sitting Prime Ministers have been assassinated, 1 former Prime Minister has been assassinated. Prime Minister of India is a high security risk everywhere, whether in India or abroad. Yet they halted the central inquiry. The Chief Justice of India is equating the inquiry of Punjab government with Government of India's inquiry. And finally, on January 12th, Supreme Court, after entertaining public interest litigations, appointed a 3-member committee headed by a retired Supreme Court Judge, Indu Malhotra, which has a representative of IB and NIA. Report is still awaited. We don't know whether it's a time-bound inquiry, what's going to happen to this inquiry, when we will, the same Supreme Court had, appointed a panel of experts to look into the farmers' agitation about the 3 reform farm laws. And that committee's report was never made public by the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court of India does not cover itself by glory by halting the central government's investigation and halting disciplinary action against the police personnel. I think that is very, very shameful. Let's look at some of the foreign response from foreign leaders. It is a serious threat. It's a serious lapse of security, but no one called the Prime Minister to express concern, knowing that 2 Prime Ministers of India were assassinated while they were in office. Now look at the whole incident. So what are the possibilities? This security lapse, it could be a conspiracy, or it could be a coincidence, or it could be simply incompetence on part of Punjab police. So let's look at all these 3 options. If it were a conspiracy, what was the motive? Was the motive to assassinate the Prime Minister? Or the motive was to humiliate the Prime Minister, the institution and the post of the Prime Minister and the government of India, by showing that how helpless you can be in your own country when the Prime Minister of the nation can be blocked on a flyover for 20 minutes. Thirdly, the motive of the conspiracy could be to provoke the SPG to fire on the so-called protesters by arranging this situation and provoking SPG in order to protect the Prime Minister. It has happened once that SPG fired on some people when they were trying to protect former Prime Minister Chandrasekhar. That's the only instance when SPG had fired on the protester. The information appears that SPG wanted to fire, but Prime Minister intervened and stopped them from firing. So if it is a conspiracy, we have to look at the angles. Who are the conspirators? Are they based only in Punjab, or they are based all over the nation? Or there's an international dimension, because 2 prime ministers were assassinated by foreign connections of the killers, or the conspirators are terrorist organizations, or any combination thereof of the above 3. Whether national organizations are in cahoot with terrorist organizations and some international entities. I think that's a serious question that needs to be looked into. If it is a coincidence, then it's coincidence, very fantastic coincidence, that Chief Minister of the state, the Chief Secretary of the state, and Director General of the Police of the state, who are supposed to be present in Prime Minister cavalcade, all 3 of them are absent. All 3 of them failed to turn up to receive the Prime Minister, but their official cars go through the cavalcade. That's a very fantastic coincidence. And the third possibility is that if it was incompetence, why would not the Supreme Court allow the central government to take disciplinary action against Director General of Police and other functionaries of Punjab government? So those are the issues that I have laid bare. And rather than my speaking throughout this discussion, I think we have chance for some, questions and answers and back and forth using this background information. And let's have other people give their views and comments.
Thank you, Adityanji. Anyone wants to speak or has any observation, question? Lalit Mathurji, can you please unmute yourself?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my question was, how come the military, Air Force, they are not ready there to protect the Prime Minister? Because they should always be there where the Prime Minister goes. He is going within 10 kilometers of Pakistan border, China border, anywhere, or within the country itself, anywhere. I think the military or the defense forces should take the responsibility to protect him and the president wherever they travel.
Mr. Mathur, actually, the Prime Minister's security is governed by Blue Book rules. And it's not the Army's responsibility. SPG is created by an act of Indian Parliament. And actually, they have the latest equipment. They have latest weaponry. And they have the latest communication, facilities. So, and their training is as rigorous as that of Army and things like that. And they have everything at their disposal. So it's not that Prime Minister security is taken lightly. If you follow the standard operational procedures, clearly there's a lapse here. And this is a lapse which should not have happened. And it calls for a strict, disciplinary and administrative action. But I think we are such a noisy democracy in India that people derail the executive authority, in this case, the central government of India. So military is not directly responsible, but SPG, the way they are chosen, the personnel and all, they are as good as military.
Could be, but I think somehow or the other, Air Force or the auxiliary forces, they need to be alert all the time. That's my feeling. Maybe I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, probably.
No, it's not about wrong. It's your concern towards the prime minister, and it's a point of view of the citizen.
Hmm.
And if SPG Act people up there who have made these blue books and the act, if there is a need, they based on this incident or something needs to be reviewed, I'm sure it will be reviewed.
This incident will lead to possibly again amendment of the SPG Act.
Right.
Things are not over. This is a very, very serious, let me be very frank, it's a very serious incident. And let the inquiry by Supreme Court be over and let the central government take some action. But this is going to lead to far-reaching changes in the security
Yes.
of the Prime Minister as well as other constitutional dignitaries.
Yeah. Thank you, Lalit Shahji. Jitendra Shahji.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. It has been said by very smart people that in matters of terrorism and in matters of intelligence, there is no such thing as coincidence. There are too many areas in this situation which just do not jive. I mean, this is I know you don't want to make this political, but it reeks of politics. It reeks of massive intelligence failure. And it reeks of so-called terrorism. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. And what is astonishing is the complicity of the media in this situation. I mean, I don't understand. The media is supposed to do a job, and the media is not doing its job. And that is the sad part of all this all. And I just cannot understand. This guy is the chief minister of Punjab, and he is on TV saying that I have sent the report to Priyanka Gandhi. I mean, Priyanka Vadra. What kind of crap is this? I mean, are we all so stupid that we have to listen to this kind of nonsense? And to me, this is such an important issue of the life of the prime minister, where he's stranded on an overpass. He is a sitting duck, and to give this kind of stupid answers, and the media is not doing anything. And the complicity of forget about all the opposition leaders. I mean, but the media, at least somebody is supposed to do something, and they are totally missing in action. Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Shah, I understand your sentiments. I really understand your sentiments, but I said in the beginning that I'm going to analyze it very analytically. And I am going to take actually a security angle, an administrative way of dealing with. And I told you that there were three possibilities. First one is conspiracy, second is coincidence, and third is incompetence. And whenever any inquiry is done, they will look systematically at this, and it is highly likely that incompetence and coincidence will be ruled out. So we are in a no-win situation right now because Supreme Court has just hijacked the issue. And Supreme Court has not put a timeline on this inquiry. So technically speaking, Supreme Court is complicit. You know, you're talking about media. I am concerned about Supreme Court, which is usurping the power of the executive of the country. You are in a war. You do not look back to these judges who have never, got a military training or something like that. And if they intervene in a war situation, if they can intervene in prime minister's security. So I am saying that this incident will probably lead to eventually, not today, not tomorrow, but eventually lead to changes in the standard operational procedures for security of the prime minister and a whole bunch of issues. So your sentiments are well taken, but I would remain above the party political, partisan view.
Yes.
Because that time has passed with the Supreme Court's involvement. I have my personal ideas or views what could have been done before Supreme Court became involved, but I will share that in a more private communication rather than in a public communication. But your views are understandable. If anyone with an iota of common sense will understand what is happening here. Are we a banana republic? I mean, that's a question.
Thank you, Jitendraji. Any other comment, observation? Anyone else? Dr. Purohit, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, you're still on mute, Dr. Purohit. Can we unmute him?
Sure.
Maybe the host can unmute him.
Right. Yes, no
Oh,
worries.
now you are unmuted.
Great.
Okay. I think what Aditi has said very sequentially exactly what happened, because I've been following it pretty closely on this one. India has a big problem. We have the enemies inside India as well as the many enemies outside the India. So how are you going to protect the people in India? It is a very big question which is coming up, and which we always know. And as we already said, that media is humbug, I should say. There's nothing, does not mean anything what media says. They just want to see the glory of the false news, whatever news they can get it. And they were just from the street, looking at the street people who take the news, they speak whatever they want to speak. And I think that is the weakest point India has. As second thing, who was protecting the prime minister? Only person was there was governor of Punjab, was protecting the prime minister because he was just beside him. So I think the problem has a big problem India has. If you cannot secure the prime minister, how are you going to secure the India? How are you going to secure the India? India, as you said, that we are very strong, we are very, but I think India is a very vulnerable country in the whole world right now. And I just said that in the past, look at that what Modi ji is doing it. He is a greatest person in the world now. He's number one in the world for the popularity and things like that. And a country in India, those politicians, my view looking at the thing is they cannot tolerate his popularity. They want to pull him down. And I think that is a very reason that even the politicians of the parties, different parties, they are not supposed to do that, but they are doing that right now in India. They try to put him down. They want to get rid of him somehow so they can win and take over the India as a party. So I think that is one of the reason. And the second thing, I think that this is not a game. This was planned, very well planned. That number one, that Modi ji was supposed to come by the helicopter. They knew that he's not going to be. And because now the weather people knows all for everything, for the 3 days before, what is going to happen next 3 days. So I think the weather was a problem. The person who received him was the governor, and the chief minister was supposed to be there. There's a protocol that governor is there, and then after the chief minister is there. Chief minister's job is to protect in this country, because that is the state. That was the state job. Because once the dignitary goes, the state take over, and that is where the legs was. And I think he was playing like a kid, I should say, the chief minister. Oh, I got a virus. I got a COVID. So I did not come there. Somebody was working in my office was a COVID. Then he said, well, I called Rahul Gandhi. I called him, took as if he's taking the permission from somewhere. I think these stories are all shows that how immature our politicians are and how badly this things was handled. So I think Supreme Court is not going to give any verdict now. The election is going in Punjab pretty soon, and they do not want to start anything. After election is over, then the verdict is going to come if we have to give. I do not, and that is what my feeling is. That is what happened. They don't want to throw the bomb right now.
Your sentiments are very well appreciated. And I said there are only three possibilities: a conspiracy, which is always pre-planned. Conspiracies don't happen overnight. Conspiracies are pre-planned. Second was coincidence, which is highly unlikely. And third is incompetence. So I am pretty sure once that dust settles down, although it is a very grave incident, some serious changes in the way Prime Minister is protected will happen. It may possibly involve, degrading or downsizing the role of the state government in Prime Minister's security. It may come to that. And as Mr. Mathur said, that maybe military should be involved. If the SPG Act is further amended and the role of the state police is taken away, then it will be the central agencies that will have 100% responsibility. In that, the states cannot actually complain because they say that they're a dictatorial attitude by the center. But by showing your either incompetence or indulging in a conspiracy against the Prime Minister, you have opened the way for changing the SPG Act by a further amendment. And I think that should be done eventually to take away the responsibility from the state police. And that may have to be done to protect the Prime Minister. You cannot have this kind of situation happen over and over again, because this seems to be a tendency by the states, some of them that are ruled by different parties, to humiliate the central government and the institution of the Prime Minister.
And we have Ambassador Kapoor wants to talk.
Yes.
He has raised his hand.
Yeah.
Ambassador Kapoor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adityanji, Dr. Adityanji, and your team for setting this up. This is a very essential and useful topic to discuss, threadbare, and to come to solutions and the future path, as you have explained it so professionally and so nicely. I'm very happy that you're doing this. I just want to narrate from my own experiences about the Prime Minister's security. When I was in Cambodia as ambassador, the Prime Minister was going, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji at that time. he was going to make a trip to Cambodia after the last visit had been 50 years before by the Prime Minister of India. So after 50 years, a visit was going to take place. So at that stage, the Indian side, we all insisted on a bulletproof car, etc. And the Cambodian government organized a very good bulletproof car with a fridge and a television and a phone and everything inside the car for the Indian Prime Minister. And as luck would have it, later we learned that the terrorist, Hambali, who was later caught by the US intelligence, was in Cambodia on those dates. Then a second visit of the Prime Minister had to take place in Cambodia while I was still ambassador for the first meeting of the India-ASEAN summit level meeting with all the leaders of the ASEAN. And I received some intelligence through the American ambassador and others that some terrorists traveling on a false passport with the name of Bharat Sharma, a Muslim terrorist, but with this Indian name and Indian passport, had come into Phnom Penh, deposited $100,000 and flown away before 24 hours. And so in the second visit, then I sent this message to Delhi and insisted that we need even more security this time for the Prime Minister. So we tried to source the bulletproof car, but then we learned that the bulletproof car which had been provided to the Indian Prime Minister the first time was actually the car of the Prime Minister of Cambodia. And they could not spare the car this time because there were 10 leaders from the ASEAN who were coming. So they said if 10 leaders are coming from ASEAN and the Cambodian Prime Minister gives his car for the Indian Prime Minister, it will not be seen in good light by the other leaders of the 10 other countries. So then the Indian embassies in ASEAN and all over Southeast Asia, we tried to source some good bulletproof car, and we did not succeed. The costs were very high or they were in bad shape. And I insisted with the SPG at that time that nothing less will work. So it was the first time that the government of India took a decision to put 2 bulletproof cars from India on an Antonov 144 plane, cargo plane, and ship 1 bulletproof car to Cambodia and 1 bulletproof car to Laos, where the Prime Minister was going. So that was a new paradigm which started at that stage. But later we learned that the dreaded terrorist who was in Guantanamo Bay for a long time, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was in Cambodia during the second visit of the Prime Minister. This is all incidentally in the open source now in Google. The dates of Hambali's movements and the dates of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's movements, they coincide exactly with the dates of the visit of the Prime Minister of India to Cambodia. Now, in retrospect, I felt very, sort of relieved and satisfied that I had insisted with the Indian side to, even in the second visit, to have the maximum security arrangements. And it got, proven by the facts which came out later. So for me, having worked very closely with this aspect, where the institution of the Prime Minister, it's not the person of the Prime Minister, it's the institution. And when such an attack has taken place on the institution of the Prime Minister, on the protocols, on the safety requirements, what I want to ask you and all the others are the following questions. As to why is there not a continuing discussion on a daily basis till a solution is found by the media, by the think tanks in India and all over the world? As how can you let, elections are happening in India, that's an important point. And the Supreme Court may not be keen to give a decision because then it'll be seen as interfering in the election process. But why can't a learned dialogue take place as to, like you have said very nicely, that either it's a conspiracy, or it's a coincidence, or it is incompetence. Now, this sort of discussion needs to be held across the board, irrespective of your party affiliation. And it is basically, if I have to use some words, it's a very shameful and dastardly act by the law agents, the law enforcement agencies. Law and order is a state subject. Now, Punjab government, DGP not being there, Chief Secretary not being there, all that you have said, I don't want to repeat all that. But the media also behaving in this fashion and highlighting and making fun of it, and cartoons and jokes, and repeating absolutely untenable sort of statements and positions, or in a way that almost seem to support those statements or justify those statements by the chief minister and others, is what, to me as a former diplomat and bureaucrat for India, extremely shocking. And how do we ensure, like you have said, that the act may have to be amended, and new things may have to, like in London when our Chief Justice died, they incorporated a lot of new protocols in terms of putting a very serious responsibilities on the embassies all over the world, Indian embassies, when such visits take place. Here in this case, that sort of dialogue is very essential. That sort of narrative is very essential, that it is a very serious lapse. And how do we correct it is what my question to you and to everybody on this group is.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Kapoor. Again, it's a very serious subject, and I don't want to sort of, breach the line of decency by making quote unquote emotionally charged statements. The security of the Prime Minister of India has evolved as threats have, increased over a period of time. So just to reassure our audience, access to bulletproof cars used to be an issue in the past. It's no longer an issue. The SPG Blue Book mandates that Prime Minister's motorcade comprises a fleet of vehicles, the core of which consists at least 2 Mercedes Maybach S650 guards, 3 armored BMW 7 Series sedans, 4 armored Range Rovers, at least 8 to 10 BMWs 5S, 6 Toyota Fortuners Land Cruisers, and at least 2 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter ambulances with multiplicity of medical specialist surgeons, and at least 1 liter of the blood group of the Prime Minister. So things have changed. Prime Minister have access to an airplane which is almost like Air Force One. And I am giving indications that SOPs may have to be changed, SPG Act may have to be changed. But more important than that, our constitutional arrangement will have to be changed, and law and order may have to be put on concurrent list rather than on the state list in order for central government to take direct responsibility. Some of the people from the press and also some of the people from opposition parties have said that, oh, SPG is involved in Prime Minister's security and NIA is involved. So lapse is with them, not with Punjab Police, without realizing that law and order is a state subject, and state police and Director General of Police does have some responsibility there, even by SPG Act and by the Blue Book. But I think the time has come that has to change. And like Lalit Mathur was saying, that involve the military, but that would require change in the constitutional arrangement and giving role to the central government in law and order. So law and order will have to be put on concurrent list, and then you will have a cacophony of voices saying that the quote unquote federal structure of the constitutional arrangement is under assault. But you cannot have these threats to the Prime Minister and then subsequent marking and lampooning of the person of the Prime Minister as if you can just, settle personal. It's such, not only such immature act, but also an indecent and immoral act that you are jeopardizing the nation's security by trying to score some political brownie points because you don't like the prime minister who has been in office for more than 7 years. I think that is very despicable and shameful conduct. I don't want to say anything more than that. But this incident, whatever the Supreme Court does and finds out, but I think in next 2.5 years before the next general election should lead to significant change in security and law and
But I
order.
think it should also lead to a lot of soul searching by the country and the people. Because as you have said, mocking about it and making cartoons, etc., is absolutely despicable. I could not agree with you more. I agree with you 100%, Dr. Adityanji. And the whole country needs to do some soul searching.
Varinder ji, would you like to speak something? Varinder,
Yes,
please.
he's on mute right now.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Dityanji. It was very refreshing for me to get up to date on the issue. I've been reading about it. I'm not as knowledgeable as the two ambassadors who are on the screen are, and all the colleagues who are sharing their views. I'm an academic, like many of you. I like to absorb all this information. I have a fleet of students who need to be educated, the future leaders. We have the maximum number of students from India. They are all interested in this issue. So being not an authority on the matter, but certainly education by a student of this issue, I'll be able to carry this message to the university and to the people whose families are in India, and they are interested as well. I'm personally enlightened by the discussion. Perhaps at another point I'll have some views, but I'm in the learning phase right now. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Venji. Adityanji, if I may add something different. I was just reading recently something on self-sacrifice, what it means and how it is relevant here, that as a humanity, when it has progressed, we have learned to self-sacrifice for ourselves, then for our family, then for our community, and then for our nation, and that's how it becomes nationality. If an individual's focus of self-sacrifice is more on his community in terms of national interest, we may have to find a way when Prime Minister is involved, because we are talking here about Prime Minister, whichever state, whichever third party or wherever he's going, we may have to observe the human behavior of the people in charge, where their loyalty, call it, or this, I'm using the word self-sacrifice for community versus national interest. And these are very dynamic and not easy to pinpoint, or politically, obviously, nobody will say these things, but just thought came to my mind that, because how would you can make as many law as you want, but there are always going to be people involved who you have to trust.
It's about to close the matter, but let me mention a little bit, if you don't mind. Surinder Purohitji has been very much involved in this whole thing. He has been talking to me. Surinderji, can you listen to me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, and he has been very much involved because his brother is the governor of the state of Punjab. So he was very much part of the whole process. And of course, we were fortunate that I talked to Surinderji quite a bit. He talked to me, and we knew what was going on. And of course, we know our brother very closely, and I know how distressed he was when the things were happening the way they were happening. Okay, I just want to mention this, as they call it, obiter dicta. Otherwise, that's okay. Thank you.
I think it's.
I think, I think, my last word will be that God took care of our Prime Minister, that he is such a poised person, so nobody could touch him. And I'm glad that my brother was with him. They were all together. He received from the airport and he was in his car. So I think, luckily, I didn't lose my brother. I think that God was also taking care of these two people. And I think God is always there. And I think India has to change. And whatever we can do, put one drop, and we try to change India, we should do that. Basically.
Thank you very much, Dr. Purohit. And this is what I'm hinting at, that serious changes have to happen. The business as usual cannot be tolerated if India as a nation has to survive. Prime Minister of India is a national institution. An assault on the Prime Minister of the India or the post of the Prime Minister or the person of the Prime Minister is an attack on India, India's securities, India's existence itself. So we have to open our eyes and we have to make sure that this incident is not forgotten like any other incident. Serious changes have to take place, including change in constitution and putting law and order into concurrent list so that central government may take any actions as it deems necessary for the protection of the constitutional dignitary. No longer we can actually rely on the goodwill of the state administration because we have traitors working from within. And I didn't want to use that word, but yes, we have traitors working from within, not only trying to attack the Prime Minister, but trying to attack the nation of India. And I think that situation has to change. And we all have that responsibility to change the status quo. India has to transform itself from a soft state, from a lamb state to a hard state. Come what may, whether it is the Supreme Court, India's securities, India's institutions have to be safeguarded. And Prime Minister of India is the utmost national institution whose security has to be safeguarded. We cannot afford to lose another Prime Minister.
Thank you, Adityanji. Thank you, Dr. Purohit. Thank you, Bhishmji. I think it has been a wonderful conversation today. And at this point, we may close today's call.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
very much. Thank you,
Thank you.
Rajin.
Thank you.
Thank you.